The first time I heard my wife say I was worth more dead than alive, she thought I was asleep. I wasn't, Dot. It was almost midnight. I'd fallen asleep in my recliner after another 12-hour shift. My back hurt, my knees ached, and I remember waking up because I heard her laughing in the kitchen. Not the laugh she used to have when we were young. This one was colder, almost excited. I stayed still when I heard another voice, her younger brother Eric. "I'm serious," she whispered. "If Michael died tomorrow, the insurance alone would pay off everything." Eric chuckled. "You'd finally be free," she laughed again. "No, I'd finally be rich." Every muscle in my body froze. For a second I honestly thought I had misunderstood. Maybe they were joking, Dot. Maybe I dreamed it, Dot. Then she said something I'll never forget for as long as I live. I swear, sometimes I look at him and wonder why he's still breathing. Silence, Dot. Then both of them laughed. I felt my stomach drop. After 31 years of marriage, after raising 2 children, Dot, after working every overtime shift I could find, that was how my wife talked about me. Not as her husband, not as the father of her children, not even as a person, Dot, just Dot, a life insurance check waiting to happen. I closed my eyes before they walked back into the living room. A minute later, I heard a blanket being placed over me, Dot. Then I felt her kiss my forehead. "Sleep well, honey." The words made my skin crawl. That fake kindness, Dot, it was worse than the conversation, because now I knew the woman I'd spent my entire life trusting had become someone I didn't recognize, and she had no idea. I had heard every single word. She thought I was sleeping, Dot. She thought I was completely blind. She had no idea that by sunrise I had already made the first decision that would change every one of our lives forever. And it all started, Dot, with one signature. Asterisk. We rented a tiny apartment with stained carpets and a broken heater. We couldn't afford furniture. Our first dining table was an upside-down wooden crate. She used to joke that one day we'd laugh about those years, and we did, for a while. Then our son Ryan was born. 3 years later came our daughter Emily. Life became busy. Expensive, complicated, but somehow we always made it work. When Ryan wanted to play baseball, picked up weekend shifts. When Emily dreamed about college, I emptied my retirement savings without telling anyone. I wasn't perfect. I missed birthdays because of work. I came home exhausted more nights than I can count, but I never stopped showing up, never stopped providing. I honestly believed that was what being a husband meant. Protect, provide, sacrifice. The strange thing about sacrifice, is that the people receiving it often stop noticing it. Eventually, it just becomes expected. Nobody thanks the man who always says yes. Nobody notices the bills that somehow keep getting paid. Nobody asks why his boots are falling apart while everyone else has new shoes. Because Dad will figure it out. Dad always does, and I did every single time, until the day I realized that my own family had started seeing me less like a husband and more like an ATM that happened to breathe. Asterisk. The first real warning came about 5 years ago. Linda suddenly became interested in our finances. Not unusual, except she'd never cared before. She started asking questions. How much was left on the mortgage? What was my pension worth? How much life insurance did my company provide? At first, I thought she was simply planning for retirement. We weren't getting any younger. Those conversations made sense, Dot, so I answered every question. Without hesitation, without suspicion. One evening, she asked something that felt different. If something ever happened to you. She stirred her coffee casually. How long would it take before the insurance pays? I laughed. I have no idea, she smiled. You should find out. I remember thinking it was an odd question, but then she kissed my cheek. The moment passed, or at least I thought it had. Over the next year, she slowly took over more of our paperwork. She insisted on organizing our documents. Passwords. Bank accounts. Insurance policies. Retirement files. She even bought a fireproof safe. She called it being responsible. I called it smart planning. Neither of us argued. Why would we? She was my wife. I trusted her with everything. Looking back, that's exactly what she was counting on. Trust. Because trust is the easiest thing in the world to weaponize. Especially inside a marriage. About 2 years before everything fell apart, Eric suddenly started showing up all the time. I'd never liked him. Not because he was loud. Not because he borrowed money, but because every conversation with him somehow ended with someone else paying the bill. He'd failed at 3 businesses. Lost 2 houses. Gone through 1 ugly divorce. Yet somehow, nothing was ever his fault. According to Eric. The economy was against him. His partners betrayed him. Banks were greedy. Employers were idiots. Everyone owed him something. Linda always defended him. He's family, Michael. Family. That word cost me tens of thousands of dollars over the years. Loans I never got back. Credit cards. I quietly paid off. Medical bills. Car repairs. Rent. There was always another emergency. Another crisis. Another reason Eric needed help. And every single time, Linda looked at me with those pleading eyes. Just this once. I believed her every time. I had no idea. Those weren't emergencies anymore. They were investments. Just not for me. The strange part wasn't that Eric kept asking for money. It was that Linda stopped asking me before giving it to him. The first time I noticed, I was balancing our monthly budget after dinner. There was a $12,000 withdrawal from our savings account. I frowned. Linda, what's this? She barely looked up from her phone. I loaned it to Eric. I blinked. $12,000? He needed it. I understand that, but why didn't we talk about it first? She sighed dramatically, as if I were the one being unreasonable. It's our money, Michael. No, I replied calmly. It's our savings. That's different. She rolled her eyes. I knew you'd overreact. That sentence stayed with me, not because of what she said, but because of how easily she dismissed me. For the first time in our marriage, I felt like a guest in my own finances. I let it go. Looking back, I shouldn't have, because once someone learns you'll forgive something, they stop asking permission. They start expecting forgiveness. A few weeks later, Eric showed up driving a brand new pickup truck, not new to the world. New to him. It couldn't have been more than a year old. Chrome wheels. Leather interior. The kind of truck a man drowning in debt shouldn't be buying. I walked around it. Nice truck, he grinned. Got a great deal. I looked at Linda. She immediately looked away. That told me everything. During dinner, Eric couldn't stop talking about his fresh start. New business, new opportunities, new clients. Every sentence sounded like another sales pitch. Then he raised his glass. Couldn't have done it without my sister. Linda smiled proudly. Neither of them looked at me. Not once. That was the moment. I realized something had changed. I wasn't the head of our household anymore. I was the funding source. Nothing more. Around that time, Emily started visiting more often. Our daughter had always been different from Ryan. Ryan loved excitement. Emily loved peace. Ryan called only when he needed something. Emily called just to ask how I was feeling. One Sunday she came over with homemade lasagna. Linda was out shopping with Eric. Emily looked around the house before lowering her voice. Dad. Yeah. Is everything okay? I smiled. Of course. She didn't buy it. You look exhausted. I'm just getting older. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You don't have to pretend with me. For a second I almost told her everything. How tired I was. How lonely I'd started feeling inside my own marriage. How invisible I'd become, but I couldn't. Children shouldn't have to carry their parents' burdens, even grown children. So I smiled again. I'm fine. She nodded. But I could tell she didn't believe me. Before she left, she hugged me longer than usual. As she walked toward her car, she turned around. If you ever need me, you call. I watched her drive away with tears burning behind my eyes. Sometimes the people who love you most can see your pain long before you admit it yourself. Ryan was different. He lived about 40 minutes away. Successful sales manager. Nice house. Nice neighborhood. Always busy. When he visited, conversations usually lasted 5 minutes. Then he'd ask to borrow something. Tools. The trailer. Money. Last minute. Help with a project. I always said yes. One Saturday, he stopped by unexpectedly. Dad, I need 15 grand. I actually laughed. I don't have 15 grand sitting around. He looked surprised. What happened to your savings? Before I could answer, Linda spoke from behind me. We've had some unexpected expenses. Ryan nodded like that explained everything. He didn't ask another question. He simply shrugged. Well, let me know if something changes. Then he left. No hug. No concern. No asking how I was doing. As I watched his truck disappear, I realized something painful. Somewhere along the way, my children had learned the same lesson Linda had. Dad will figure it out. Dad always has money. Dad always fixes everything. The only difference, Emily still remembered there was a human being behind the wallet. A month later, I received a phone call from my insurance company. The representative was polite. Mr. Carter, we're just confirming the beneficiary information on your policy. I smiled. Sure. She read the names. Everything sounded normal. Then she paused. I also see your wife recently requested information about increasing your accidental death coverage. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm sorry. My wife requested what? There was a brief silence. Oh, I assumed you already knew. I don't. She called asking about increasing the payout under your existing policy. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When was this? She gave me the date, 3 weeks earlier, the same week she'd asked me to sign several retirement papers. Papers I barely looked at. Because why would I? She was my wife. The representative continued talking. I barely heard another word. After hanging up, Sat in my truck for nearly 20 minutes. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she was simply planning ahead. Maybe. But then I remembered that night. I'd finally be rich. The sentence echoed in my head over and over. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about betrayal. I was thinking about danger. Real danger. That evening, I didn't confront Linda. I watched. I listened. For the first time in 31 years. I stopped being a trusting husband, and I started paying attention. She smiled exactly the same, cooked dinner exactly the same, asked about my day exactly the same. But now. Everything looked different. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every kind word sounded calculated. Every touch made me wonder, was this love? Or was she making sure I stayed comfortable long enough to sign whatever came next? That night, lying beside her in bed, I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. I made myself one promise. I wouldn't accuse her without proof, but I also wouldn't ignore what my instincts were screaming. If Linda was hiding something, I was going to find it. Quietly. Patiently. And if I discovered I was right, I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I wasn't even going to tell her I knew. I was simply going to make one quiet change that would destroy every plan she'd been making behind my back. I started doing something I hadn't done in decades. I paid attention, not just to what Linda said, but to what she did when she thought I wasn't looking. For years, I'd walked through life believing trust meant never questioning your spouse. Now, I realized trust without awareness is just blind faith. And blind faith can become very expensive. The following Monday, I left for work like always. Lunch bucket. Coffee. Steel toe boots. Everything looked normal. I drove 3 blocks away, then parked behind an abandoned hardware store. I waited. Exactly 18 minutes later, Linda backed out of the driveway. She wasn't headed toward the grocery store like she'd told me. She drove in the opposite direction. I followed from a distance. She eventually pulled into the parking lot of a small office building downtown. There weren't any stores nearby. No restaurants. No doctor's offices. Just accountants, attorneys, and financial planners. I watched her walk inside. She stayed there for nearly an hour. When she came back out, she wasn't alone. Eric walked beside her carrying a thick manila folder. The two of them looked excited. They hugged before getting into separate cars. I didn't follow either one. I didn't need to. For the first time, I knew this wasn't just my imagination. Something was happening, and whatever it was, they were planning it together. That night, Linda acted like nothing had happened. She asked about work. She made my favorite pot roast. She even suggested we watch a movie together. A month earlier, I would have called us a happy couple. Now, every smile felt like theater. Halfway through dinner, she casually asked, "Did you ever finish signing those retirement papers?" I looked up slowly. "Which ones? The packet on your desk?" "Oh, I forgot." Her smile disappeared for just a fraction of a second. "You forgot?" "I've been busy." She forced another smile. "It's important." "I know. I'll get to it." She nodded. But I noticed something. She didn't look disappointed. She looked frustrated. Almost impatient. That tiny reaction told me everything. Those papers mattered far more Then she wanted me to believe Dot, so after she went to bed, I finally opened the envelope. It wasn't one document. It was nearly 40 pages. Most of it looked routine. Retirement updates, benefit summaries. Investment information. But near the back, one page caught my attention. A power of attorney form. My eyes narrowed. Why would I need that? Then I saw it. If signed, Linda would have legal authority to make financial decisions if I became incapacitated. Incapacitated. The word echoed inside my head. Slowly. Falling into place. Insurance. Financial access. Retirement accounts. Power of attorney. Individually. Each document made sense. Together. They painted a picture I didn't like, not one bit. I quietly placed the papers back exactly as I'd found them. The next morning, I smiled. "Well, take care of those forms today." Linda looked relieved. "Perfect." She kissed my cheek before leaving. The second the front door closed, I picked up the entire packet. And drove somewhere she never expected. I drove straight to the office of my longtime attorney. Daniel Brooks. We'd known each other for nearly 20 years. He'd handled my father's estate, helped us refinance our home, prepared our wills. Most importantly, he wasn't just my lawyer, he was my friend. When I walked into his office, he smiled. "Mike, you look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." His smile faded. "What's going on?" Without saying a word, I handed him the folder. He spent almost 20 minutes reading every page. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Did Linda prepare these?" "I think so." He folded his hands. "Did you ask for any of this?" "No." Another long silence. Finally, he looked directly at me. "Mike, some of these documents are perfectly normal." I nodded. "And some?" He slid one page toward me. "This? The power of attorney?" "Yes. There's nothing illegal about it. But," he sighed, "if your marriage is healthy, this can be useful. If your marriage isn't." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I understood. Then I asked him something I'd been afraid to say out loud. "If you were me, would you sign any of this?" His answer came instantly. "No, not maybe, not let's think. Just no, that one." Word confirmed everything my instincts had been screaming. I told Daniel everything. The insurance, conversation. Eric. The late night comments. The office meeting. Every detail. He listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, he asked one question. "Do you believe your wife wants to hurt you?" I stared at the floor. "I honestly don't know. And that's exactly why you need to protect yourself." He opened another folder. "This is what I recommend." For the next hour. We quietly rebuilt my entire financial life. New beneficiary instructions. Updated estate documents. Emergency contacts. Limited account access. Every legal protection available. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. Just careful planning. Then Daniel smiled. "You mentioned one signature." "Yes." "Which one worries you most?" I pointed toward the power of attorney. He nodded. "Then don't refuse." I frowned. "What?" "Replace it." "I don't understand." He pulled out another document. "This version appoints someone else." I looked down. My eyes landed on one name. Emily Carter. My daughter. Instead of Linda. I couldn't help smiling. One signature. One completely legal signature. And suddenly, every plan Linda thought she had would quietly fall apart. I picked up the pen. Without hesitation, I signed Dot as I walked back to my truck. Dot, for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I was prepared. Linda still believed she was 10 steps ahead. She thought I was the same trusting husband who signed anything placed in front of him. She had no idea. I just changed the one signature her entire plan depended on, and she wouldn't discover it until it was far too late. I didn't tell Emily what I'd done, not yet. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone would be. Daniel kept the updated documents locked in his office vault, and certified copies were filed exactly where they needed to be. Legally, quietly, without drawing anyone's attention. When I got home that afternoon, Linda greeted me with a smile that seemed just a little too bright. "Did you get the paperwork finished?" I hung my jacket on the hook. I took care of it. The relief that crossed her face lasted less than a second, but I caught it. "Oh, good," she said. I was starting to worry. "You don't have to. I know." She walked over and hugged me. Years ago, that hug would have made me feel loved. Now it felt like someone checking whether a safe was still locked. I hugged her back anyway, because if she believed nothing had changed, she'd keep making mistakes, and people who think they're winning usually stop being careful. Visual: Linda hugging Michael, while he quietly stares past her shoulder, expression unreadable. 3 days later, Eric called. "Mike, buddy." I almost laughed. Eric only called me buddy when he wanted something. "What's up?" "I've got a business opportunity." "Of course you do." He ignored the sarcasm. "I just need a small investment." "How small?" $25,000. I nearly dropped the phone. 25? You'll get it back. When? A few months. I smiled to myself. I'd heard that promise before. No. Silence. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean exactly that." His voice hardened. "You've never said no before. There's a first time for everything." He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Linda called me at work. "Did Eric ask you for money?" "He did." "And?" I said no. She sounded genuinely offended. "Michael, he needs help." "So do I." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm 60 years old, still climbing ladders every day, and I'm done financing everyone else's life." She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly said, "We'll talk tonight." The way she said it, it wasn't a discussion, it was a warning. Dinner that evening was unusually quiet. Ryan happened to stop by after work. Emily wasn't there. It was just the four of us. Halfway through the meal, Linda finally spoke. "Eric told me what happened." "I'm sure he did." "He said you embarrassed him." I told him no. "That's embarrassing." "No," I replied calmly. "Expecting other people to fund your life is embarrassing." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Linda put her fork down. "Family helps family. I've helped him for 15 years. "Then why stop now?" "Because helping someone stand is kindness. Helping someone refuse to walk is enabling." Nobody spoke for the first time in years. I hadn't backed down. Ryan looked at his mother, then at me. Finally he stood. I should get going. He left without finishing dinner. The second the front door closed, Linda's smile disappeared. "I don't recognize you anymore." I looked directly into her eyes. I was about to say the same thing. She looked away first. That had never happened before. Over the next 2 weeks, little things started changing. "Linda, Checked the mailbox before I got home. She spent more time behind closed doors talking on the phone. Whenever I entered the room, conversations ended. 1. Saturday morning, I walked into the garage. Unexpectedly, she was standing beside the filing cabinet. The insurance folder was open. She slammed it shut, so quickly she nearly caught her fingers. "Oh, you scared me. I was looking for the warranty." "On what?" She hesitated. "The washing machine." "The washing machine warranty is in the kitchen drawer." She stared at me. I smiled. "I organized those years ago." She forced a laugh. "Guess I forgot." No, she hadn't forgotten. She simply wasn't expecting me to know exactly where everything belonged, because for years she assumed I never paid attention. That assumption was becoming very expensive. The real surprise came from Emily. She called me late one evening. "Dad, you busy?" "No. I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." She hesitated. "I ran into Uncle Eric yesterday." My stomach tightened. He said something strange. "What?" "He joked that Mom won't have to worry about money much longer." Silence. Then she added, "It didn't sound like a joke." I sat down slowly. What exactly did he say? She repeated it word for word. "Tell your dad not to work too hard. He won't have to for much longer." A chill ran through me. Eric had always been careless. Cocky people usually are. They think they've already won. Emily spoke again. "Dad, is something going on?" I closed my eyes. For weeks I'd been trying to protect her. But now she was already standing closer to the truth than I realized. "I'll explain everything, but not yet. I just need you to trust me." "I do. Always." When the call ended, I stared out the window for nearly an hour. Linda wasn't just making reckless decisions anymore. She and Eric had become overconfident. And overconfidence leaves fingerprints. Monday morning brought another unexpected visitor. It was Daniel. He never came to my house. Not unless something was important. Linda had already left. Daniel stepped inside carrying a sealed envelope. "I received this Friday." "From who?" "The insurance company." My pulse quickened. "They notified me because your estate documents changed. And they also informed me someone has requested another policy review." "Linda?" He nodded. "But this time." He handed me the letter. She asked whether a recent beneficiary change had been processed. I frowned. "I never changed my insurance." Daniel looked at me carefully. "No, you changed your estate. Someone else. Appears to believe the insurance changed, too." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel quietly said, "Mike, I think your wife is expecting something that no longer exists." I looked down at the envelope. Without realizing it, Linda had just confirmed exactly what she believed. She was going to receive. And she had no idea that every assumption she'd built her future around. Was already falling apart. That night, Linda poured me a glass of red wine. She almost never did that. She smiled warmly. "You've been working so hard. You deserve to relax." I accepted the glass, raised it toward my lips. Then my phone rang. It was Emily. Perfect timing. "I need to take this." Linda's smile faltered. "It's late?" "I know. I'll only be a minute." I set the untouched wine on the kitchen counter and walked outside. As I answered the call, I glanced back through the window. Linda looked at the glass. Then she quietly picked it up. looked toward the front door, and poured the entire thing down the sink before washing the glass. She had no idea. I was watching. I couldn't prove what she'd intended. Maybe she'd simply changed her mind. Maybe not. But from that moment on, I made another silent promise. I would never again eat or drink anything I hadn't prepared myself. Not until I knew exactly how far this was going. I didn't tell Daniel about the wine, not immediately. There wasn't enough evidence. Suspicion isn't proof. And I refused to become the kind of man who accused someone without facts, So instead of confronting Linda, I changed my routine. Every meal I ate at work, every bottle of water stayed sealed until I opened it myself. Every cup of coffee came from the diner across the street. If Linda noticed, she never mentioned it. Instead, she became unusually affectionate. She started asking when I planned to retire, whether I was feeling tired lately, whether I'd scheduled my annual physical. Questions she'd never cared about before. Each one sounded harmless. Together. A week later, Daniel called. "Mike, I think you should come by." His voice was calm. Too calm. When I arrived, he closed the office door before speaking. "I hired a private investigator." I stared at him. "You what?" "You asked me to protect your interests. This was the safest way." He slid a thin folder across the desk. Inside were photographs. Linda. Eric. The same financial office I'd seen before. Another meeting. Then another. Then a restaurant. And finally, a photo of Linda sitting with a man I'd never seen. "Who's that?" Daniel looked at his notes. His name is Stephen Hall, financial advisor. I kept turning pages. Every meeting happened while I was at work. Every meeting had one thing in common. My name. The investigator had photographed documents on the table. One page clearly showed my insurance policy number. Another mentioned estate planning. A third listed estimated payouts. I felt sick, not because they had meetings, but because every meeting revolved around what my death would be worth. I closed the folder. "I've seen enough." Daniel nodded. No. "I don't think you have." He handed me one final photograph. Linda. Eric. Stephen. All three smiling. And sitting in the middle of the table was a brochure for luxury beachfront condos in Florida. The price tag started at $2 million. I drove home in silence. For 31 years, I believed Linda dreamed about growing old with me. Instead, she'd apparently been planning what life would look like without me. That hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money. Because of the memories. Every anniversary, every Christmas, every promise we'd ever made. I suddenly questioned all of them. Had she loved me, or had she simply loved the life I provided? Those thoughts followed me all the way home. When I walked inside, Linda smiled. "You're late." "Work. Liar. Liar. Liar." The word caught me off guard. "What?" "I called your office. You left hours ago." For the first time, I realized she was tracking my movements. I smiled calmly. "I had errands." She stepped closer. "What kind of errands?" "The kind that don't require permission." Neither of us spoke. Then she laughed. The conversation ended. But the marriage? I think it ended right there. 2 days later, Emily invited me to dinner, just the two of us. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me carefully. "Dad, I know something's wrong." I've known for weeks, I sighed. I was trying to protect you. You always do. She reached across the table. But maybe it's time someone protected you. For the first time, I told someone. Everything. The insurance, the conversations, the documents, the investigator. The lies. Emily listened without interrupting. By the time I finished, there were tears in her eyes. I can't believe, Mom. Neither can I. She shook her head slowly. What are you going to do? I smiled. The same thing I've always done. Think before I act. She squeezed my hand. I'm with you. No matter what happens. Those 6 words gave me more strength than she'd ever know. The following Friday. Linda announced some exciting news. I booked us a weekend at a lake house. I looked up. A lake house? You've been stressed. We deserve time together. Everything inside me screamed not to go. But another thought crossed my mind. If I kept refusing everything, she'd realize I knew. So I smiled. Sounds nice. Her face lit up. I knew you'd say yes. As she walked away, I quietly sent Daniel one text. Leaving Friday. Lake house. If anything changes, you'll know where I am. His reply came less than 30 seconds later. Understood. Be careful. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a weekend with my wife. I was walking into a situation I no longer trusted, and I intended to leave it with the truth. No matter what it cost. As I stood in the garage loading our bags into the SUV, I looked at the framed family photo hanging on the wall. 31 years, 2 children, a lifetime of memories. I whispered something I'd never imagined, saying, I hope I'm wrong. Because if I wasn't, the woman smiling beside me in that photograph. Had already disappeared long ago, and the only thing left to do. Was make sure she could never destroy what I'd spent a lifetime building. I closed the tailgate, locked the house, and climbed into the driver's seat. Linda smiled as if this were the beginning of a romantic getaway. She had no idea. It was the beginning of the end. The drive to the lake house took just under 3 hours. Linda spent most of it talking about retirement. Places we could travel, restaurants we should try. A smaller home by the coast. She painted a beautiful future. The strange part, every plan she described only made sense if someone had a lot of money. Much more money than we actually had. I kept nodding. Smiling. Acting like the same trusting husband she'd always known. Inside. I was counting every mile. Every turn. Every opportunity to leave if something didn't feel right. By the time we reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to set. It was beautiful. A 2-story cedar house overlooking a quiet lake. No nearby neighbors. No boats on the water. Just silence. Too much silence. Linda walked inside first. I knew you'd love it. I looked around slowly. Large fireplace. Open kitchen. 2 bedrooms upstairs. 1 downstairs. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed something odd. The refrigerator was already stocked. Steaks. Wine. Fresh fruit. Even my favorite brand of coffee. We've never been here before, I said. Who bought all this? Linda smiled. I called ahead. Maybe she had, maybe she hadn't. I wasn't interested in guessing anymore. I was interested in facts. While she unpacked our clothes, quietly walked through the house, checking doors. Windows. Phone. Signal dot smoke detectors dot then I found something that made me stop. A brand new security camera, mounted above the back patio, facing the dock. Another one overlooked the driveway. This place has cameras? I called out. Linda answered from upstairs. I guess the owners installed them. Maybe, or maybe someone wanted a record of who arrived and who didn't leave. That evening we sat on the porch watching the lake. Linda handed me another glass of wine. I smiled politely. I'm driving tomorrow. I'll stick with water. She looked disappointed. You've hardly had anything to drink lately. I've been trying to be healthier. She forced a smile. Good for you. For almost an hour we sat in silence. Then she asked a question that caught me off guard. If you could change one thing about your life, what would it be? I didn't answer immediately. Finally I said, I would have paid more attention. She laughed softly. To what? The people around me. Her smile faded. You sound mysterious, do I? She changed the subject, but I noticed she didn't touch her own wine either. She simply held the glass. Watching me. Waiting. Around midnight I heard footsteps. Very soft, very careful. I opened my eyes without moving. Linda wasn't in bed. The bedroom door stood slightly open. I glanced at my watch. 12:43. A faint light glowed downstairs. I quietly slipped out of bed. Years of construction work had taught me how to move without making noise. As I reached the staircase, I heard voices. Linda. And. A man. Not Eric, someone else. I stayed hidden behind the wall. I told you he'd come, the man whispered. Linda sounded nervous. He suspects something. Not enough. When tomorrow is over, none of this will matter. My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. The man asked, Are you sure the paperwork is finished? Linda smiled. I'm sure. I almost laughed. No. She wasn't. Not anymore. Because the paperwork she believed existed. No longer did. The front door opened. Closed. A car drove away. I waited another 5 minutes before walking downstairs. Linda was already back in the kitchen making tea. She acted surprised to see me. You scared me? I couldn't sleep, she smiled. I was just making chamomile. Who was here? Her hand froze. What? I heard someone. You must have been dreaming. I looked directly into her eyes. For a brief moment, neither of us blinked. Then she laughed. This old house makes strange noises. I nodded slowly. Maybe. I returned upstairs. She believed she'd convinced me. She hadn't, because while she was making tea, I'd noticed something lying beside the sink. A second coffee mug. Still warm. The next morning. Linda suggested we rent a small fishing boat. You've always loved fishing. I have. We walked toward the dock. The lake was calm, almost perfectly still. The rental boat rocked gently against the wooden pier. Then I noticed something. One of the ropes securing the boat had been partially cut. Not enough to break immediately, just enough to snap under pressure. I crouched down, ran my fingers across the fibers. Fresh. Very fresh. My stomach tightened. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it wasn't. I stood up. I'm not feeling it today. Linda looked genuinely startled. What? Let's stay on shore, but we already paid. Then we'll waste the money. Her smile vanished. You've been saying no to everything. I know. She folded her arms. You're acting paranoid. Maybe I was. Or maybe paranoia keeps people alive. We spent the afternoon walking around the lake instead. Several times, I caught Linda checking her phone, looking irritated, almost as if someone else's plan had just fallen apart. That evening, my phone vibrated. It was Daniel. Only 3 words. Call me now. I stepped outside. What's wrong? His voice was urgent. The investigator found something. What? He identified the man at the cabin. I waited. He isn't the owner. Then who is he? He's employed by Stephen Hall, the financial advisor. I frowned. And? Daniel took a deep breath. Mike, Stephen Hall is under federal investigation for financial fraud. The words hit me like a freight train. This isn't just about your marriage anymore. It's bigger, much bigger. I looked back toward the cabin. Linda stood in the kitchen window, watching, and a smiling. She had no idea. Everything was beginning to unravel, not because of luck, not because of revenge, but because the people she'd trusted had already started making mistakes of their own, and mistakes leave evidence. I ended the call with Daniel and slipped my phone back into my pocket. For a long moment, I simply stood there listening to the water lap against the dock. The air was cool. The woods were silent, but something had changed until that moment. I'd believed this was only about my marriage. Now, I knew there were other people involved. If Stephen Hall was already under investigation, then whatever Linda and Eric had planned might collapse on its own. The question was, would it collapse before someone got hurt? I wasn't willing to find out. As I walked back toward the cabin, I made another decision. The weekend was over. I wasn't spending another night there. Linda looked surprised when I started packing. What are you doing? We're leaving. She frowned. We just got here yesterday. I've had enough fresh air. Her smile faded. Michael, don't be ridiculous. I zipped my bag closed. I'm tired. We'll drive home tonight. She stepped between me and the bedroom door. For once, can't you just relax? I looked directly at her. I've never been more relaxed. That answer confused her. She moved aside. Without another word, 20 minutes later, we were on the road. She spent almost the entire drive staring out the passenger window, not talking, not smiling. Twice, I noticed her texting someone. Each time she angled her phone away from me. I didn't ask. Who? I already knew. The following Monday morning, I received another call from Daniel. This is moving faster than I expected. What happened? The federal investigators contacted Stephen Hall's office. I tightened my grip on the phone, and they seized computers, financial records, everything. What does that mean? It means people connected to him are going to panic. He paused. Mike, if Linda was depending on him for anything, expect her behavior to change. He was right. That evening she barely spoke during dinner. She kept checking the news on her phone. When she thought I wasn't looking, I saw her call Eric 3 times. He never answered. For the first time since I'd known him, 3 days later, there was a knock at my front door. Not a neighbor. Not family. 2 investigators. They introduced themselves politely and asked if we could talk. Linda's face immediately turned pale. We're reviewing financial transactions connected to Stephen Hall. One investigator looked at, Mr. Carter, would you mind answering a few questions? Of course. We sat in the living room. They asked about insurance policies, estate planning, bank transfers, Eric, every answer I gave was truthful, simple, documented, when they finished. One investigator thanked me. Then he turned toward Linda. Mrs. Carter, we'd also like to speak with you. She forced a smile. Certainly. I stood up. I'll give you some privacy. As I walked upstairs, I heard the first question. When did you first meet Stephen Hall? Linda hesitated long enough to tell me everything. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. After they left, Linda stormed upstairs. You told them. I calmly looked up from the book I was reading. Told them what? You know exactly what. I answered their questions. She pointed a shaking finger at, you've been spying on me. No, I've been protecting myself. For several seconds she simply stared. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting weeks to hear. What exactly have you changed? I closed the book. What do you mean? The paperwork? What paperwork? The retirement papers. I smiled politely. Oh, I handled those. Her face lost every trace of color. You signed them? I signed what needed to be signed. She turned around and walked out without another word. A few minutes later, I heard the front door slam, then tires screeching away from the driveway. She wasn't going shopping, she was trying to find out whether her plan still existed. She was about to discover it didn't. The next morning, Daniel called laughing. I had never heard him laugh in a professional conversation before. What happened? Your wife came to my office. I smiled. I thought she might. She demanded copies of the documents, and I told her I couldn't release confidential legal records without your authorization. What did she do? She became angry, very angry. He chuckled again. Then she accidentally admitted something interesting. What? She said. Those documents were supposed to make everything easier. Daniel's voice became serious. Mike, she doesn't know. Know what? That the document she depended on no longer exists. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in over a month, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Relief. Not because she'd been caught, because she finally understood she was no longer in control. That evening Emily came over. She found me sitting on the back porch. How are you holding up? I've been better. She sat beside me. I'm proud of you. I laughed softly. For what? You didn't become bitter. You became careful. I looked at my daughter. You? No, I kept thinking I'd failed as a husband. She shook her head. No, you succeeded. You loved someone honestly. What she chose to do with that love isn't your failure. Those words lifted a weight I had been carrying for weeks. Sometimes justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. Sometimes it begins the moment you stop blaming yourself for someone else's choices. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, My phone buzzed one last time. A text message. Unknown number dotted. Contained only 6 words. She knows about the signature. Now no name no explanation. Just those 6 words. I looked toward the empty driveway. Linda. Still hadn't come home for weeks. I'd been reacting to her moves. Now, she knew the game had changed, which meant whatever happened next would decide everything. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and waited, because one thing was certain: the signature had done exactly what I intended. It hadn't destroyed my wife. It had forced her to reveal exactly who she really was. And once the truth comes into the light, it never goes back into the shadows. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside made me look toward the window. Every passing car made me wonder if Linda had come home. She never did. At 6:30 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Ryan. Dad. His voice was shaky. Mom's here. Where? At my house. I closed my eyes. Is she okay? I don't know. She keeps saying everything is falling apart. I'll be there. When I arrived, Linda looked nothing like the woman I'd married. Her makeup was smeared. Her hair was a mess. For the first time in weeks, she looked scared. Ryan stood in the kitchen, confused. Emily arrived a few minutes later. Nobody spoke. Finally, Linda looked at me. You knew. I didn't answer. You knew all along. I knew enough. Her shoulders dropped. The investigator. The lawyer. The paperwork. It was you. I nodded once. It had to be. Ryan looked between us. What is everyone talking about? Linda covered her face. I took a deep breath. It started the night I heard your mother tell Eric that I was worth more dead than alive. The room fell completely silent. Ryan actually laughed. Then he realized I wasn't joking. He slowly turned toward his mother. Mom, tell me he's lying. She's COULDN single quotes T. She just cried. Sometimes. Silence is the loudest confession of all. Over the next hour, everything came out, not because I yelled, not because I threatened anyone, because the truth had nowhere left to hide. Linda admitted she and Eric had been drowning in debt. Eric had convinced her they could secure their future. Stephen Hall promised to help them restructure everything, borrow against future assets, prepare the estate. He made it all sound legal. Simple. Safe. Little. Greed replaced judgment. Judgment disappeared completely. I never planned to hurt you, Linda whispered. I just, double quotes, stopped thinking about you. Those words hurt more than anything else she'd done. Not because they were dramatic, because they were honest. She hadn't loved another man. She hadn't run away. She had simply reached a point where my life mattered less than her financial security. That realization broke something inside. I'm not my heart. My trust. And once trust breaks. It rarely goes back together the same way. Ryan sat with his head in his hands. I borrowed money from Uncle Eric. I thought he was starting a business. Emily looked at him sadly. He used all of us. Ryan nodded. No. We let him. That was the first truly mature thing I'd heard my son say in years. Sometimes people don't become adults until life forces them to. This was his moment. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. I walked over and hugged him. I've already forgiven you. But don't waste this lesson. He nodded through tears. I won't. The legal process took months. Stephen Hall was charged with multiple financial crimes, unrelated to me. His records exposed dozens of fraudulent estate schemes. Eric wasn't arrested, but he wasn't spared either. His creditors came after everything he owned. The truck disappeared. His accounts were frozen. Within a year, he had filed for bankruptcy. For the first time in his life, nobody came to rescue him, because there was nobody left willing to believe another excuse. As for Linda, we divorced quietly. No screaming. No courtroom spectacle. Just signatures. Real signatures, the kind that actually mattered, because months earlier, I'd quietly changed the only signature that could have given away everything I'd spent my life building. Instead of chaos, my estate remained protected. Instead of manipulation, every decision required my approval. One legal choice, made at exactly the right time, changed the ending of the entire story. A year later, Emily invited me to dinner. This time, Ryan brought his family too. The atmosphere felt different. Lighter. Peaceful. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody argued. Nobody expected me to solve every problem. For the first time in decades, I wasn't sitting at the table as the provider. I was sitting there as their father. And somehow, that meant more. Ryan raised his glass. To Dad, the strongest man I know. Emily smiled. No, the wisest. I laughed. I've made plenty of mistakes. Emily reached for my hand. Maybe. But you finally stopped sacrificing yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. She was right. That wasn't selfish. It was healthy. People often ask whether I hate Linda. The answer surprises them. I don single quotes. Hatred keeps you tied to the past. I chose something different. Distance. Peace. Boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't always mean giving someone another chance. Sometimes it simply means refusing to let their choices poison the rest of your life. I hope she finds peace. I truly do. Just without me. Because some relationships don't end with a fight. They end the moment trust quietly walks out the door, and no amount of apologies can convince it to come back. Looking back, the title of this story was never really about insurance. Or money. Legal documents. It was about one decision. The night I heard my wife say I was worth more dead than alive. I could have confronted her. I could have exploded in anger. Instead, I stayed calm. I listened. I paid attention. And I quietly changed one signature. That signature didn't just protect my money. It protected my future. My dignity. And ultimately, my life. If there's one lesson I've learned after 60 years, it's this. The loudest revenge isn't screaming. It isn't humiliation. It isn't destroying someone. The loudest revenge. Is living a life they can no longer control. I lost a marriage, but I found something far more valuable. Myself. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough.